would love for you to just sort of tell us a little bit more of yourself in this context. I first met Pete on the page, before Hutchmoot, in reading the Finn books, the Fiddler books, which I just loved so much. And actually, one of my regrets is that Pete started reading them, doing an audiobook version. And I totally understand why. I think it's a good reason why you didn't carry on, but I think you could do it, you need to pull a team together.
I'll figure it out.
You'll figure it out, because
Eventually,
because they're just such great books. And I was so excited when my nieces and then the nephew, the ones who are older, were old enough to be able to read those books. But then it was actually, I believe, my first Hutchmoot that had the reading of The Hiding Place. You did that Seated. You remember that, Lorna? 2019. And so just all the actors were on the stage just reading from the script, and that had everybody cheers. And I should back up. I grew up with many Christians of my generation who grew up in Christian homes. I grew up with The Hiding Place on the shelf. I probably read it when I was too young. I probably read it when I was 10 or 11, but really impacted by the story, but kind of thought of it as a story of my parents' generation. An old-timey story. And so I was really surprised to see that somebody was putting The Hiding Place, as I think of it, as a story of the 60s, 70s, 80s sort of thing. And probably a little cynicism. And
Me
didn't
too.
know you well enough to, had I known you as I know you now, I would have had no cynicism about what was going to appear. And it was beautiful. It was so moving. This isn't an acted play. We just heard it read on the stage, people sitting in desks on stage, and it was phenomenal. It was so beautiful. And so then I never thought I would get to see it performed. And I know some people here also saw it when the stage projection was filmed, and Ottawa was one of the cities that we actually got to see it here, and it was so amazing to be able to share that with people. I think we went on my birthday when that came out, and just so beautiful. Thank you so much. It was a great birthday present. And again, to the people who are with me, and Sharon was with me, Rhiannon was with me, and to hear the response of people, and just the profound response to that. And then most recently, I've read all of your plays that are published, and enjoyed that reading. But I also didn't expect I'd have the privilege to see your performance of A Christmas Carol. And during the Shad Linlathen, Pete was sitting at the back right there when I think we were about to sing Come Thou Fount, and I did my usual opining about when hymnals remove the original words, just because people don't know what the word Ebenezer means. And so instead of helping us remember these really important words, and I said almost nobody knows what the word Ebenezer, when they hear Scrooge, they don't know what it means, and Pete's back there, I do. And little did I know at that point in time that he was working on the stage production or thinking about working on the stage production of Christmas Carol. But again, when I heard Pete, I was like, why is Pete doing the Christmas Carol? Like, everybody has done the Christmas Carol.
But they've done it wrong.
And guys, I hope the staging happens again, because I had the crazy privilege in December because Jennifer, I was invited down to join Jennifer on George MacDonald's birthday, his 200th birthday. Robert Room had a George MacDonald event, and I happened to be in town for that, the opening week of Christmas Carol, and got to see Pete's Christmas Carol on stage. Stunning visual heaven. Like, it was just so, the costumes, the staging, and like, I don't want to do the giveaway line, the tagline is just so, that line that you threaded through, like, Pete gets the story, and so many people, by not even knowing or caring about the name Ebenezer, miss the whole point of that story. And so I invite you to at least, can people even read?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, it's published, and my edition, I actually got it here.
Oh, hey, awesome.
Yeah, it's published here, and it includes the whole play and the entire text of the original book.
Oh.
So you can compare and see what Pete made up and what Dickens made up, and go, man, Pete's even better than Dickens. That's not true. It's a good idea.
Yeah. We did the panel. No, that was we've been on 2 panels together. I just realized the one about women in literature, but about adaptations.
Oh yeah.
And both really works that happened because of Pete. Those adaptations that we were talking about, the one I was involved with as well, which was the Golden Key, the graphic novel downstairs, which is not actually. I even push back about the word adaptation. For those McDonaldites or pure McDonald people, is the entire text in that graphic novel, with the exception of he said, she said. The entire text is there. It's phenomenal.
But it's transliterated into a different medium.
Yes,
so.
yes, and stunningly done. Stunningly done. But I know there are people here who are interested in the concept of adaptation and transposing, and so Pete has really profound and very interesting thoughts on that topic. So I encourage you to pick his brain on that topic.
I guess I've written the wrong talk for
yeah. No, that's going to lead me back to, you made a huge transition. I've just talked about your stage writing career, but you started, I know you first as a novelist. So can you tell us just a wee bit, to give us a bit more of an introduction to you?
Yeah, sure.
That transition. Thanks.
It's actually a great way to introduce all this, because like Jennifer was talking about how, we go through things and we don't understand why they've happened maybe, and we fall away from that part of our life or career, and then miraculously it all comes back and it makes sense later. Like this is kind of like that. Like I started out in film school in college wanting to make movies, and after a couple of years kind of fell out of love with what that was going to require of me, as far as what it takes to come up through the film sort of world and get to the point where you feel like you're able to make your own creative expressions rather than script writing, all that kind of stuff. So I kind of fell away from the film thing and just went on with writing novels, and I was very satisfied with that. So then it was a surprise to me when, about, I don't know, maybe it's been 15 years ago almost now, a friend of mine who was part of a vibrant theater company in Nashville came to me and was like, hey, would you ever be interested in writing for the stage? And out of stupidity, I said, heck yeah, let me do that. And said yes, just because I like to say yes to anything that sounds like fun. But it didn't even occur to me until I started that I'd already tilled that soil by writing scripts for screen. And it's just kind of a subtle shift away from writing for the stage. So I felt very comfortable in the format. And jumped into the deep end. And the funny thing about that story is there was a show called The Battle of Franklin, which I'll talk about a little bit later. But they had this vision to present stories and songs about the Civil War. And so he just said, hey, would you kind of thread together some stories and then we can do some songs, and that's all we want. And I was like, gotcha. And I went home and I accidentally wrote a whole musical. Brought it back to him, and they're like, whoa, that's really a lot more than we had in mind, but it's also great. So let's see if we can pull that off. And interestingly, 2 days before we started rehearsals, which were 2 weeks before opening night, didn't have any songs. So I sat down with a songwriter and I was like, I think these are the songs we need. And we came back the next day and he had written all of them. And those are the songs that are in the show. And miraculously it works. So that was a miracle that I don't ever want to try to recreate, because I thought we were all going to die. But anyway, the other thing I like to say about the difference between writing for the page and for the stage is that as an author, you spend untold hours and weeks and months in solitude, like creating this thing that you're going to deliver to readers on the page. And on the one hand, it's really fun because you are kind of the person who gets to construct that entire experience for the reader. Nobody else gets input into that. I absolutely am in charge of what I'm going to create in your head to tell this story. But the reality of that is when release day comes and your book is out in the world, you sit in like depressive silence wondering if anybody cares or if anybody's bought it or read it or anything like that. Transition to writing for the stage, you do the whole thing. Well, you write a little bit in solitude, but then you do the whole thing in community, working with artists and actors and stage designers and lighting designers and all this stuff. It's this hugely collaborative thing. It's a lot of fun. And then on opening night, everybody stands up and claps even if they didn't like it. And so I greatly prefer that version of the creative process, both the collaboration and the affirmation, which isn't to say that I will never write another novel, but at the moment I'm enjoying this stage. Does that answer your question? Yeah. So I'm going to start here. I think everybody got a piece of paper. Did everybody get one of these? Anybody need one?
Over here.
I'm going to read this just as a sort of invocation to the talk. Something wild. Something wild was here, and something wild remembers still. The quiet trees bent down on knees to drink the silent stream, and they tell each other in the rattle of leaves of a wild as deep as their griefs. The playing of rain new with the fall on crags of stone, old since the fall, caresses the face of the aged rock till he cracks a broken smile. And he watches and mourns the wild that was and the wild that is, yet he longs for the wild to come. For the wild is two-personed, split into facets that shine out different lights. The one, the piece that undergirds creation, building up and wearing down, but patient in the years. And the other, the careening thoughtlessness that surmounts the ancient stream, cuts the thoughtful hill, making straight the way that feet once knew by tiptoe round the ruminant roll of the land. That wildness breaks the trees that bent and shuddered and mutters over the trouble of the babbling brook. But when night fights back the cutting, rutting, wilder ways and calls out a kingdom of cadent cicada scream, the groan of the wild resolves and remembers that when the ungoverned falseness speaking in the rattle of engines recedes, the wildness of time will be gone, gone, echoing into the fullness of a wilder peace, untamed for then unbound, when the wild itself shall overmaster wild, and its ancient limbs limn the ancient hymn, singing something wild is near. A wild and far-off city. About 10 years ago, Jennifer and I saw a movie called The Way. Anybody seen this? Anybody in here? You go? Okay, it's a story about a man whose son dies on the first day hiking the Camino de Santiago. The father decides to take up his son's pack and walk the pilgrimage in his place. It's a powerful film about grief and about a whole lot more. But what exactly is the Camino de Santiago? Well, it's basically a 500-mile hike across Spain. The most popular route is to begin at St. John Pied de Port in France and walk west to Santiago de Compostela. It takes people usually 30 to 40 days. By the way, let me define my terms. The word Camino, does anybody know what it means?
The way.
Camino is Spanish for the way. So when you hear me say the Camino de Santiago, what I'm saying is the way to Santiago. Remember that, the Camino, the way. Who else says the way, right? Jesus says, I am the way, I am the Camino. By the way, no sane hiker would hike the Camino with this ridiculous pack. It's not like the Appalachian Trail where you have to have everything on your pack. It's easy hiking. You don't need more than about 15 pounds. And when you see somebody like this on the trail, everybody shakes their head. I'm like, what is this person doing? So since we got married almost 14 years ago, Jennifer and I have loved getting away to the wilderness to go hiking, even if that wilderness is just a few miles down the road. So when we saw the film, which, by the way, I do highly recommend everybody see this film. That's Martin Sheen, directed by Emilio Estevez. I think they're making a sequel, which sounds like a terrible idea, but it's a great movie. When we saw the movie, we loved the experience that we saw depicted in it. We loved it so much that we set for ourselves a goal of hiking the Camino ourselves in spring of 2022, which was, for the record, the year I turned 50. Which is a daunting thought to turn 50 and think, you know what I'm going to do this year? I'm going to walk 500 miles. That's like walking from where I live in Nashville to Florida, to give you a little scale. It's a long way. Well, by pure coincidence, we discovered soon after we made this decision that our good friend Thomas McKenzie was planning to do the same thing. He's also our priest. He's an Anglican priest at Church of the Redeemer, where we go in Nashville. Well, he was taking a much needed sabbatical from work after 7 years to spend some alone time on the trail, and he could not wait to leave. He and I had breakfast every Wednesday morning, and we talked about it all the time. What kind of shoes are you going to buy? What kind of, shirts are you wearing? What kind of socks? All this kind of stuff. He had it all zeroed in, knew exactly how he was going to do it, and he couldn't talk enough about it. And then, in August of 2021, the day before his sabbatical was set to begin, the day before he wanted to put on his pack and set off on the way, Thomas and his oldest daughter were killed in a car accident. I think it's fair to say that Thomas and Charlie went on a far different journey than the one they had intended. They left behind a whole lot of folks that loved them. And that was a hard time for us, for Jennifer and I. It was a hard time for our whole community. We had lost our pastor. And our experience pales in comparison to what his wife and his remaining daughter have gone through. Since he died, we have dinner with Laura, his wife, almost every Friday evening. And I can tell you that even now, 4 years later, those dinners still involve tears. So historically speaking, the city of Santiago de Compostela, beautiful place. The Compostela, by the way, means the field of stars. So the name of the city is St. James on the Field of Stars. And there's a whole story behind that I won't get into, but it's beautiful. Well, this pilgrimage to Santiago on the Field of Stars is one of the 3 great pilgrimages of the Christian faith. Does anybody know what the other 2 are? Anybody want to guess?
Francigena?
I'm sorry?
Francigena?
I don't know what that is.
Oh, that's another pilgrimage.
Okay.
Lourdes?
I'm sorry?
Lourdes?
No.
France?
No. Where might Christians want to walk to?
Jerusalem.
Jerusalem is number 1, and number 2 is Rome. That's correct. So for 1,000 years, the 3 great pilgrimages have been Jerusalem, Rome, and Santiago. And does anybody know why Santiago is a pilgrimage? Does anybody know what the word Santiago means? Saint James, Saint Iago. So Santiago is thought to be the resting place of Saint James. So for over 1,000 years, the church has encouraged believers to embark on the pilgrimage road to one of these cities as an expression of devotion and as a quest for atonement. In other words, the church has said it's good to leave home at least once in your life and walk a really, really, really long way. For over a millennium, Christians have done just that. The motives and theology have gotten pretty muddled over the years, but a core understanding of the value of pilgrimage endures. People put their lives on hold. They set out for a distant city, braving whatever they encounter along the way. The year that we left was a holy year, which I think any Catholics in here? I apologize for any Catholic jokes I make. They're all in good faith. So I think every 7 years is a holy year in the Catholic tradition. So the year that we set out was a holy year, which means that Pope Francis was offering an indulgence to anybody that completed the Camino. So if you walked in through the right door of the cathedral at the end of the road, you would have your sins forgiven. And I thought, how generous, Pope. Like, didn't Jesus already take care of that? But our joke amongst each other was, we're going to do a whole lot of sinning on the way, because when we get there, it's all wiped off the slate. Anyway, that didn't happen. And they wouldn't let me go in the door because I wasn't Catholic, and I didn't want to lie about it. So as you can imagine, the trip that Jennifer, after Thomas died, the day before he was to leave, this had a huge impact on the way that Jennifer and I thought about this trip that we were going to take. We'd seen this movie which set us on this road about a man walking this pilgrimage and grieving his son, and here we were about to set out to walk this pilgrimage in what felt like Thomas's place. Something we loved had gone, had become part of what was, not what is, and other things were lying up ahead along the road. And so in the Catholic tradition, as I said, Santiago is thought to be the resting place of St. James the Apostle. You can even stand in front of the reliquary there in the sacristy of the church. I think that's the right word, sacristy? I don't remember. Where his bones are alleged to be. And you can wonder for yourself about the historicity of that claim. I think I said on Instagram at the time, if he's in there, Here is St. James, patiently awaiting the day of resurrection. So the Camino is absolutely bedazzled in tradition. One of the most obvious is that it's traditional for pilgrims on the road to wear a scallop shell. It's a symbol of the Camino, of the way, and its meaning is that all roads lead to Santiago. So if you think of this, Santiago is this part of the shell. You can see that all the lines stream toward it. Does that make sense? You kind of see that? And where am I? Do I have another slide? So it's true that the coast of Spain is strewn with scallop shells. They make for good tourist merch today, the way that they always have. And all the pilgrims buy them. Do I have one? Believe it. I'm a proud carrier of the Camino shell right here, tattooed on my arm. All roads lead to Santiago, or in my version of it, Jennifer drew this, by the way. It's a cross symbolizing all roads lead to the cross. My participation in that tradition. So tradition. Tradition, that word keeps coming up. I've said traditional resting place, traditional scallops, traditional pilgrimage. But what does that really mean? Well, the reality is that that word comes with a lot of negative baggage. We often equate tradition with old-fashioned or out of date, or things our parents made us do. But in the context of the Santiago being traditionally understood as the resting place of St. James, maybe it even takes on the meaning of a nice old idea that's probably not even true. It's a word we tend to apply to things that have passed beyond their relevance, things that are moving toward irrelevance. Traditional publishing, traditional music, traditional education, traditional family, traditional values. You get the idea. Tradition. And if you know the movie, you know that it's not ever said in a loving way. He's like, tradition, we've got to keep it. He's holding on to something, right? But that's not what T.S. Eliot thinks. In his essay called Tradition and the Individual Talent, Eliot argues that the word traditional, especially as it's applied to art, is not a negative label. It's instead a positive, even desirable one. He says that no poet, no artist of any art has his complete meaning alone. Now, I'm an artist, a writer, a playwright, and the longer I engage in this work of putting words together to tell stories, the more aware I am of the tradition I'm a part of. Art is by necessity traditional. New works, yours, mine, Spielberg's, Shakespeare's, they're all built on the works of they're all built on old works. Each new poet stands on the bones of those who have come before it. Some examples. Out of the Impressionists, we have the Post-Impressionists, right? Out of, anybody want to guess? The blues and gospel, we get rock and roll. By the way, do y'all know who this is?
Alice Cooper, baby.
And do you know what he does these days? He's a Sunday school teacher. Amazing. Yeah, has been his whole life. He's been a Christian, and who would have thought?
Does he dress like that to teach?
I hope so. I desperately hope so. Out of Greek and Roman myth come, any guesses?
Percy Jackson.
Superman.
Yeah, that's it.
The
Yeah.
Marvel Cinematic Universe, right? All built on the bones of things that have come before them, reinterpreted in our own time. So Eliot's point is that to be traditional is not to be old-fashioned or conservative, but to be informed by and to stand upon the long history of what's come before us. Even if an artist rejects tradition, he's still building upon the thing he chooses to reject. Grunge music, right, is rejecting classic glam rock of the 80s. I can tell by the few laughs in here that I'm one of the few children of the 80s. There's another one.
Deeply
All right.
formed by
Yeah.
this.
Can you do this? Bon Jovi, Vince Neil, Dee Schneider, and what's his name? Paul Stanley.
Paul Stanley.
Paul Stanley.
Oh, yeah.
Kiss. Yeah. Anyway, deeply formative for me. All of my novels are built on these guys.
We need
That's shockingly true in some ways. I'm not going to get into that. By the way, does anybody recognize this image? This is Doré, and it's one of his images from Paradise Lost. Had Doré in the 19th century come forward into the 80s, he would have dominated the album cover market, as is evidenced by Striper, The Hell with the Devil. I mean, look at this. These are the same picture. Like, I'm joking on the one hand, but on the other, this artist, whoever it is clearly drawing from Doré. It's fascinating. I love it. Also, great album. So, if Paradise Lost, for instance, were the only piece of poetry you'd ever read, you might still consider it a masterpiece. But you'd be missing half the story, because when a work like Milton's is taken with its historical and artistic context, it's elevated to its full power by virtue of the foundations on which it stands. Who are those foundations? Virgil, Homer, Ovid, Isaiah, Job. The bones we build upon are often ancient, beyond our ability even to comprehend. Because Job, Milton. Because Pygmalion, My Fair Lady. Because Ahab, Khan. Anybody Star Trek? Come on. Because Mallory and Tennyson, Geit. So you've heard me mention it a couple times, but Malcolm is working on his great epic right now. His epic poem of the Arthurian legend called Merlin's Isle, 4 volumes. And just a couple of, so Stephen Kratz, young man, brilliant illustrator, is doing woodcuts for illustrations on the interior, kind of like you see over here on the wall by Ned Bustard and Steve Prince. Same basic style of artistic creation. And this is just a couple of examples of his sketches. These are not the final. But I see very clearly in something like this references to Barry Moser and Doré. And if you're familiar with those artists, I think you'll see it too. And over here, this is an illustration of the Knights of the Round Table discovering the Siege Perilous, where Galahad is destined to sit. And if you look really closely, it's built on imagery from The Last Supper by Da Vinci. You can see the gestures that these gentlemen are making. All built on things that have come before, which is what gives them their power. So the point is, all of these works, Paradise Lost, Divine Comedy, Geit's forthcoming Arthuriad, they're all strewn with allusions to the works of elder poets and writers. They're packed with references to myths, legends, historical figures, historical events that we have often all forgotten, which is why Eliot goes on to expand on his idea that we all build on tradition by suggesting that the immature poet imitates, but the mature poet steals. Be suspicious of anyone who wants to be original. Nothing is more boring or senseless than originality. Now, I'm partly joking, but I'm partly serious. Something truly original is almost by its nature uninteresting because it has no point of reference from which it can draw meaning. But when we long for originality, and we do, what we're actually longing for is a fresh drawing together of what's come before, a new way of looking at old things. So, an artist or writer builds his work out of bricks fashioned by his forebears, and this is right and good. And to be clear, when Eliot says that a mature poet steals, he's advocating for synthesis, not for plagiarism. Does anybody know this quote?
Oh, it's
Every artist is a cannibal, every poet is a thief, they all kill their inspiration and write about the grief.
you too.
You too. Thank you, Bono. The great thing about Bono is that he's never melodramatic. This is Mephisto, by the way. Who's Mephisto?
The devil.
Right, the devil, or a part of Greek mythology, the Mephistopheles. Right, so even Bono here in this play acting that he did during this era of his career, he's referencing something that came far before him. But the sentiment of this lyric is true. It's true of all art. What we create draws its power from its context. Art, both in its creation and its consumption, requires a knowledge of and participation in tradition in order to be fully realized. Okay, Pete, but what is the point? What does this have to do with a wild and far-off city? Hang with me. We're on a journey here. We'll get there. So far, we've been talking about tradition in terms of the importance of the past in art and literature and the way we tell our tales. But let's talk for a moment about the opposite end of the spectrum. Let's move from the past to the present and then on to the future. Great stories, great works of art exist, I think, not merely within the boundaries of their presentness, they exist beyond it. And here's what I mean. Middle-earth has a very clear sense of tradition. Tolkien even has an epic name for it. He calls it the Cauldron of Story. It's the great soup of ideas that have been sloshed together and stewed into fresh new stories down through the ages. Tolkien's literary stockpot has a dash of Beowulf, a pinch of Germanic myth, a handful of World War I, and a dozen other flavors and influences. And then out of the Cauldron of Story, Tolkien scoops out a big bowl full of what? The Lord of the Rings. The ingredients of this cauldron are the story's past, the tradition that it's built on. The present of the story was the tale that it tells, the meal it sets before us, the taste of which I'm going to assume you all know pretty well. But let's talk about the story's future. The Lord of the Rings ends as lots of great stories do, not with finality, but with a new beginning. Spoilers. The third age of the Middle-earth has passed away by the end of the Lord of the Rings. The fourth age has begun. The ring is destroyed. Sauron is thrown down and gone. But what about Frodo and Gandalf and Galadriel? They don't simply end. They sail to Valinor, to the Undying Lands, beyond the boundary of the story proper. And where do they leave us, the reader, the movie watcher? We're left on the shore. We're left to wonder. If it's a good story, we're often left with wonder. When we turn the last page of a great book, it's hard to escape the feeling that the story is still going on somewhere, somehow, even though we aren't privileged to its details anymore. Does anybody know of a great book like that? Mm-hmm. For me, Lonesome Dove, Jayber Crow, Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. I want my stories to have endings like that. Anybody else got examples of characters that you still think about and wonder what's going on? Surely somebody's going to say Harry Potter, right? Mm-hmm. I think this is a commonality to all great storytelling. The ending of Lewis's last battle tells us all of this incredibly specifically. For them, it was only the beginning of the real story. All their life in this world and all their adventures in Narnia had only ever been the cover and the title page. Now, at last, they were beginning chapter 1 of the great story, which no one on earth has read, which goes on forever, in which every chapter is better than the one before. It's the job of a storyteller to lead us just so far along the road, showing us sights and marvels. And then, on the last page, the author plants for us a signpost, as if to say, the story goes off that way, just over that hill. And there are untold tales that we may never know because, sadly, we have to follow our own story back into our own world, into our own present. We love to mourn the end of a good book. We love to imagine what might be if only the author had kept on writing. For example, has anybody read the Wingfeather Saga?
Yes.
So my brother's books, fantasy epic. He gets lots of letters and complaints about the ending of that story. And if you read it, I'm not going to spoil anything, but if you've read it, I think you probably know why. The ending has a delicious note of ambiguity. It doesn't declare, it points, it hopes. When he was writing it, I remember we talked a lot about how to land that final note, and I think he nailed it. Somehow that sense of incompleteness is part of the necessary ache of a great ending. When a beloved tale ends, all we have are the signposts left behind that point us on towards some undiscovered mystery. Something that maybe the story itself wants us to lean further into, to discover on our own. And this includes Scripture, by the way. In case you didn't notice, Scripture doesn't resolve. We are still here, longing for that resolution, wondering about it. So this is what our art, our stories, our songs, our poems, our sculptures are. They are all signposts suggesting that there is more to see than we have yet seen, more to know than we have yet known. Personally, spiritually, culturally, the signposts we create mark the ways we've come and the ways we hope to go. And a well-built signpost endures, becoming in time like an eroded marker left by a long-forgotten civilization, like some ruin of a lost elf city in Middle-earth. The well-built signpost, the well-crafted work of art, the well-lived life may even become a tradition, kind of like St. James. So when Thomas Mackenzie died, just a matter of hours before he was to set off in his great adventure, it was a shock to all of us who knew him. It didn't feel real. To be honest, it still doesn't. Jennifer and I talk often. He should be here. He should be preaching the gospel, making us laugh, making us look at the reality of the resurrection and everything it implies. In the days after he died, I remember laying in bed one night and feeling the horrible ache of having had a close friend ripped out of me. Me and several other friends had been that day to the car impound to retrieve his effects. It was hard. The car was crushed beyond recognition, and we had to physically dig through it, prying his belongings out with force, the same way the EMTs had had to remove Thomas himself. We were faced with the very real physical matter of his death. And I thought of the apostles and how they watched their friend murdered by Romans. And that night, as I lay in bed, racked with grief, I remember how St. James and all the rest of them were sitting in an upper room, afraid, grieving, and suddenly their friend walked in. Even though they had seen the blood and mess of his dead body, here he was, alive. And I understood for the first time how real their joy must have been, because I so desperately wanted my friend to walk in and proclaim the reality of the resurrection right there in Nashville. But he's not here. The best I can do is stand on the shore, and I wonder. So back in 2021, Jennifer and I went on with our plans to walk the Camino de Santiago. And Thomas's passing gave the experience a whole new layer of meaning. As we walked 500 miles from France to the coast of Spain, we thought about him. We talked about him. Before we left, his wife, Laura, gave me his backpack. Here it is, right here. Camino shell. All these patches, places he had been, places he had gone. Signposts. All these countries all over the world. Well, let me tell you, if you're going to go 500 miles and you hope to get anywhere specific, it's good to have help. On the Camino de Santiago, that help most often comes in the form of a little yellow arrow. Right here. All across the countryside, in forests, valleys, mountains, deserts, you'll find these pointing the way toward your destination. They become a comfort, an assurance that you're not alone, that you're on the path, that the destination is real, and that people have gone before you. The way is strewn with these little signposts, and you'll come to expect them. After a few days on the road, you let your anxiety and concerns slip away because you don't have to follow a compass or a map or make guesses. You can trust that the way is marked. Doesn't that sound great? Mm-hmm. You just follow the arrows. You just follow the signposts. In the years since Thomas died, I've really come to understand that death is a signpost. It's an Ebenezer stone. You guys know what Ebenezer means? We talked about it a little bit. It's the stone of help. When the Israelites had been delivered from something, they piled stones one upon another to mark the way that the Lord had brought them. Ebenezer Scrooge is named the stone of help because he is a marker of the way that the Lord had changed his life and sent him in a new direction. Ebenezer stones. This is the Camino, and for 500 miles you will find these little cairns that pilgrims have stacked along the way to mark the distance they've come. These are memorials that testify again and again to the length, breadth, and depth of the fall. But if what Thomas preached is true, if what Jesus said is true, if what the apostles testified to, and the reason St. James went all the way to Spain is true, then surely death is more than a mere end point. It must instead be an arrow. A signpost doesn't announce a journey's end. It proclaims that the destination lies out of sight further along the road. On the Camino, pilgrims greet one another in one of two ways. The first is buen camino, or good way, good journey, good path. But the other greeting is a much more ancient root. It's Latin, ultrea et sucea. It means something like onward and upward, or go further, go higher. When one pilgrim encounters another, she calls out, ultrea, and the other answers, et sucea, onward, upward. People along the road have used this call and response for 1,000 years to encourage one another to keep going. Ultrea.
Et sucea.
Amen. N.T. Wright says that all Christian language about the future is a set of signposts pointing into the mist. But I think you could amend that to say, all Christian language about the future is a cry of ultrea et sucea. In other words, I know you can't see it, but something is out there. Something is up ahead. Out there in the midst, a great good is coming, is coming. It's that way. And the first thing that makes me wonder is, what's out there, right? But I wonder if that's only the first idea, the most obvious. The more interesting idea is this: whatever and whoever is out there in that mist, maybe they see us here. Maybe they've stood right here where I am. If not, who planted all these signposts and why? And then maybe all these signposts left behind, whether stories or monuments or civilizations or individual lives, maybe they are all like Tolkien's Cauldron of Story. Maybe they are all the legends, images, ideas, and ideals, the traditions out of which a future age will draw some new work. In eternity, this world will be Troy, I believe. And all that is past here will be the epic of the universe, the ballad they sing in the streets, because I don't imagine any reality putting this one in the shade entirely, and I think piety forbids me to try. Marilyn Robinson. So what if we are living, as Marilyn Robinson suggests, within an epic? Could it be that the world, our present, is itself a work of art, and that our lives are paintings and poems, sculptures and songs, all founded on that which has come before us, all foundational to what will come after? If our creative work is given depth and meaning by its relationship to its context and tradition, is it possible that we too, at this very moment, are the tradition and context out of which God's new work is being forged? Is it possible that we are metaphors, symbols, and nearly forgotten tales waiting to be grafted into the work of an age to come? Right now, right here, Tales of wars and miracles, of love and hatred, of great beauty and terrible suffering, of injustice and restoration. A tale so big that none of us comprehend the fullness of it or the vastness of the canvas on which it's stretched. Anybody read Mark Helprin, Winter's Tale? One of my favorite books. I'm going to read a passage in which Helprin's characters are talking about the nature of justice, but I want you to pretend that the same applies to the nature of all creation. It's not just justice, it's everything God is doing. Who said that you, a man, can always perceive justice? Who says that justice is what you imagine? Can you be sure that you know it when you see it, that you will live long enough to recognize the decisive thunder of its occurrence? That it can be manifest within a generation, within 10 generations, within the entire span of human existence? What you are talking about is common sense, not justice. Justice is higher and not as easy to understand until it presents itself in unmistakable splendor. The design of which I speak is far above our understanding, but we can sometimes feel its presence. No choreographer, no architect, engineer, or painter could plan more thoroughly or subtly. Every action and every scene has its purpose, and the less powerful one is, the closer he is to the great waves that sweep through all things, patiently preparing them for the approach of a future signified not by simple human equity, but by luminous and surprising connections that we have not imagined, by illustrations terrifying and benevolent, a golden age that will show not what we wish, but some bare, awkward truth upon which rests everything that ever was and everything that ever will be. There is justice in the world, but it cannot be had without mystery. We try to bring it about without knowing exactly what it is and only touch upon it. No matter, for all the flames and sparks of justice throughout all time reach to invigorate unseen epics, like engines whose power glides on hidden lines to upwell against the dark in distant cities unaware. Ooh.
Wow.
Love me some Helprin. And I think that's what's going on. And it's bigger than mere justice. We are living in the present story built upon the bones of our dead, but just as the hope of Abraham and Israel led to a new covenant in Christ, so is our own hope, our own story, the foundation of something greater and grander than we have yet seen or understood. Ultreya. I have written 4 plays, which, for the record, isn't many. I met with a friend a couple weeks ago, a fellow playwright, and she's fantastic. And when I finished with the conversation, I went to her website just out of curiosity and discovered she'd written over 20. She's younger than I am. I don't know what's wrong with me. But I do put a lot of work into the 4 that I have written. I think they all bear out some of what I've been talking about here. And I want to give you a couple of examples. Are you guys doing okay?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Battle of Franklin. Talked a little bit about it at the top. Remember what I said about originality. I mean it. Stop trying. It's a lost cause. Be traditional. Whenever I set out on a new writing project, one of the first questions I ask myself is, who are my companions in this piece? What other writers and stories are going to be my references, my partners, maybe even my co-writers? What am I going to steal? Well, in this first example, I am going to steal from T.S. Eliot, which seems appropriate. The Battle of Franklin is built upon, or it's based on a true story of a Confederate family in the Civil War. Now, I know we're in Canada here. You guys realize the Confederates are the bad guys, right? So it was a real challenge to write a story about a Confederate family. Didn't want to make them out to be heroic. Didn't want it to be a tragic kind of, heroism or anything like that. It was a very delicate thing. But it's a memory play. The conceit of the tale is that a Confederate officer has been reliving the war over and over and over again, trying to work out where things have gone so very wrong. And this particular revolution of that cycle the one that the audience sees that night, is the one in which he finally comes to see the way that he has missed what's been going on in the world, and his life finally changes. So this kind of cyclical idea of time is central to the play. Now, I also happen to love T.S. Eliot, and if you hadn't noticed, and my favorite piece of T.S. Eliot is this, the Four Quartets. Anybody read this one? Okay, everybody should read it, and you should read it many, 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 many times. You can read it in one sitting, and it gets better every time. But one of the key ideas at work in this cycle of poems is the nature of time and how it works on us. So it was a perfect reference for me in trying to tell this story about somebody trying to work their way through everything they had missed in life. So in the writing of the Battle of Franklin, Eliot's poetry was a constant companion. And the final result is a prime example of a mature poet stealing, if I can be said to be mature. So this is Eliot. What we call the beginning is often the end. And to make an end is to make a beginning. The end is where we start from, and every phrase and sentence that is right. Every phrase and sentence is an end and a beginning. Every poem an epitaph. And any action is a step to the block, to the fire, down the sea's throat, or to an illegible stone, and that is where we start. We die with the dying. We see they depart, and we go with them. We are born again with the dead. See, they return, and they bring us with them. The moment of the rose and the moment of the yew tree are of equal duration. A people without history is not redeemed from time, for history is a pattern of timeless moments. So while the light falls on a winter's afternoon in a secluded chapel, history is now, and England. We shall not cease from our exploration, and the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and to know the place for the first time. And this is the Battle of Franklin. If time could wind back this war and I could live at home in peace, I don't intend anybody would make a better son than I, a better brother, a better friend. I would spend with all these many a happy day if only this scourge would pass me over. There will be a life beyond this vale of tears, won't there? A land where we will outlive all sorrow and gloom, where all shall be joy and love and peace. I will see you in that blessed land, where the weary are at rest and where war shall trouble us no more. My end is in my beginning, but I shall make of my ending something new. And time spins us round through memory, through pain, and in these moments allows us grace enough to stand at the pinnacle from which we may survey the unshadowed valley beyond. I see a river there. It runs free and clear to the shining sea. And that is why we come. Over and over we remember again, hoping each time we will climb high enough to catch a glimpse of the land we are tumbled ever toward. And with each glimpse from the mountaintop, we learn to see the valley more clearly, to expect it more anxiously, and to take some part of it with us when we go. Time has allowed us to journey together only so far. And now it carries us along different streams, into different histories and possibilities yet to be discovered. You have been fine company, and I regret that we must part so soon. Tomorrow, we shall hope again that some happier homecoming reveals itself, and we shall not cease from our exploration until time itself falls still, and all shall be well. All shall be well. All manner of things shall be well. History is now. History is Franklin. But as for the present, I bid you farewell. So, companion, reference, the person from which I have stolen. But I mean more than a mere quotation, right? It's about structure, it's about ideas, it's about getting your head around something, and you find another writer that's done it, and you're like, I want to do it like that. Built on what has come before. Tennessee Williams was another companion. I love his memory play, The Glass Menagerie. And that was an influence as well in a lot of subtle ways structurally. not to mention scores of letters written by soldiers and family members from the Franklin area during the war, and historical resources, and finally, crucially, the unwritten and lost stories of enslaved African Americans. Yes, even the absence of a story can provide context. All these things go into my own cauldron to flavor the final telling of the tale. Another example is Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, which I'm not going to get into deeply because we're going to encounter that a little later tonight. But I was asked to adapt it for the 200th anniversary of the publication of her novel. And so this was an adaptation. It was a translation of something from a novel format to a stage format. And I think in the context of translation, there's a few questions you need to ask yourself in order to do it well. Why am I adapting this story? Is it because I'm paid to? Is it because I'm called to? Is it because I have something to say? How does the story need to change as it's translated into this new medium? And how am I making this story my own in some way? Well, first off, I was asked to do it. So that answers one of those questions. But I would not have said yes unless it was a story I felt suited my own storytelling sensibilities, something that I felt called to tell. And on top of that, it was a story I felt that had never been adapted to my liking. How many people have read Frankenstein? Oh, wow, that's impressive. Usually the answer to that question is, well, I've seen the movie. And so if you have read it, you know that I think you will agree with me that it's never been adapted well. Almost every adaptation I have ever seen has primarily focused on the idea that it's about ambition and science, the dangers of scientific discovery. And that is certainly part of the story, but it's not the most interesting part of the story, I don't think. There's so much more to it. It's a deeply theological story about creativity and our relationship with our Creator. And so when I was asked to adapt it, I was like, this is my version of that story, and that's what I was tackling. So I'm not going to talk any more about that because we'll talk about it tonight if you guys are interested. Another, Dickens. When I got the chance to work on my own version of A Christmas Carol, I jumped at it. And kind of like Frankenstein, I felt like it was a story that I'd never seen adapted to my satisfaction. I've always, there are great adaptations out there, the Muppets included, but all of them miss something. It's not scary enough, or it's not theological enough, or it doesn't delve deeply into like the cracked nature of Scrooge's soul. Like I wanted more out of them. So I jumped on the chance to do it myself. And one of the great opportunities there was I got to steal from Dickens himself, because as I read through the story, like it's a very short story. You can read it in one sitting, and there are a lot of unnamed characters in it that figure in. And I thought, well, we have to name these people because no actor wants to be man one, right? So in the context of being a fan of Dickens, I thought, well, let's just steal from other Dickens stories. So for instance, there's a couple in the play that are, or it's part of the short story. They're indebted to Scrooge, and it's a key part of the story near the end that, Scrooge is like, show me someone who feels emotion upon the death of another, and the ghost of Christmas future takes him off to see this couple who are celebrating because Scrooge has died and they don't have to repay the money. So I thought, well, why make these anonymous people when right over here in David Copperfield, you've got Mr. and Mrs. Micawber, who are perennially in debt, are entirely entertaining. And why don't we just pick them up and put them in the middle of A Christmas Carol? And so that was a great opportunity to actually co-write with Dickens, I thought. So it's this opportunity to actually, use Dickens himself as my co-writer. Lots of fun. But then the other key one for me was the part of what, I'm not even moving my things. Oh, I was going to show you all this.
I give you a knot to unravel.
For all the ruin wrought by humankind, it all might alter in a twinkling. Out of what is old, something new may yet be wrought.
I hold the keys to many changes, times, places, and other things more mysterious yet.
Come with me. Let us be explorers a while, along the misty roads of remembrance.
What is hidden cannot heal. What is hidden cannot heal.
What is hidden cannot heal.
Humbug.
Okay, so that was indulgent. I probably shouldn't have showed you all that, but I love it.
Yeah,
Um,
that was amazing.
So one of the things that I was really drawn to in the story is how powerfully it's about the movement of the spirit, right? Like we think of the three ghosts, but what are the three ghosts if not the Holy Spirit working in Scrooge's life to drive him towards something better? And so in the midst of thinking about that and thinking like how do we see these things as the Spirit, it occurred to me that a great kind of parallel was found in Gerard Manley Hopkins' poem, God's Grandeur. So I'm going to read this, and I want you to think about A Christmas Carol, and then I'm going to explain why these two things seem related to me. Anybody familiar with Hopkins and this poem? Really famous poem. The world is charged with the grandeur of God, who will flame out like shining from shook foil. It gathers to a greatness like the ooze of oil crushed. Why do men then now not wreck his rod? Generations have trod, and all is seared with trade, bleared, smeared with toil, and wears man's smudge, and shares man's smell. The soil is bare now, nor can foot feel being shod. And, for all this, nature is never spent. There lives the dearest freshness deep down things, and though the last lights off the black west went, oh, morning at the brown brink eastward springs, because the Holy Ghost over the bent world broods with warm breast and with bright wings. So I read that and I immediately think about Dickens, because it's about the differential between the trade and the industry and the way that's destroying the world and the way that the Spirit is renewing it.
Yeah.
You know, and so Dickens went out specifically to write this story to address the problems of child labor and industrial spoil of the earth, and the way that greed infects us all. So this became one of my partners in the writing of this play. So let me read you one of the relevant bits. There is a moment in Act 2 with the Ghost of Christmas Present when she says this. Yes, she, because that's more interesting. But do you see how readily the world might change? For all the ruin wrought by humankind, it all might alter in a twinkling. It's only bent lines that show out shapes of grace, and so over the bent world we spirits brood in search of a place to set a lovely curve. Look upon the mended world, glimpsed here in a meal. They feast on joy itself, and later they will lay in the cool of the evening to dream of the brown brink where morning eastward springs. So you hear Hopkins in that, right? So this is what I mean. We build on what's come before us, and those things infuse what we're making with more meaning. They make us better. How am I doing on time?
We are 3:22.
Should I do one more example? Or do I want me to move on? Let me do
Just
one.
one more.
I'll do one more. Okay, so the hiding place. Too old to bend over like that. Okay, where am I at? In the hiding place, there's a lot of spots I could pick from. I pulled from Frederick Buechner. He says he has this great line. Here is the world. Beautiful and terrible things will happen. Don't be afraid. Wow, what better place for that quote than the Holocaust, right? So I'm borrowing from Frederick Buechner. I borrow from Flannery O'Connor. I borrow from my good friend Jonathan Rogers. Jennifer and I went to Germany and visited Ravensbrück concentration camp and Dachau, and read letters and poems and prayers and looked at art from people who had been there and died there. And all these became part of the building of the play, extra to what Corey had put down in her book. You know, it's not merely Corey. Like, let's start with Corey, but then let's go to where she was and find out more. Like, I had the opportunity to, oh my gosh, one of the biggest influences on what I wanted to get out of this play was when we were at Ravensbrück concentration camp. You know, we'd been to the barracks, we'd seen where they were building the gas chambers, and then one of the final stops was in front of the crematorium oven. And I stood as close as I am to you from the literal place where Betsy Ten Boom's body left the earth. You know, I looked into its dark throat and it horrified me. And I thought, in the context of that experience, like, how do I give this to the audience? How do I take this experience and recreate this on a stage? And then beyond that, can we make something that horrifying beautiful? Because what is the cross if it's not the transformation of the ugliest thing into the most beautiful thing? So I don't know if I achieved any of that, but that's part of what I'm after in the play. So it's a story of a Dutch family hiding Jews from the Nazis, and it does a lot of wrestling with the nature of evil and suffering. So as I'm thinking about these things, how do I justify the fact that God allowed this to happen to these people, to these good people? I could not help but think of the Brothers Karamazov. Anybody read? Good job, guys. I know it's a slog. But there's a very famous chapter in that book in which there's two brothers, Ivan and Alyosha. Alyosha's a priest. Ivan is kind of like a revolutionary, very unhappy with the world. And he's challenging his brother on, why is God allowing suffering? Why? And there's this great long passage of him just really bearing his soul about his anger with God. And part of what's so powerful about it is that he's not suggesting he doesn't believe in God. He's saying, I know that God exists. I know that at the end of time, all of this will be revealed to have meant something greater, but I cannot accept that it required the murder of children. And he says at the end of that speech, it's not that I don't believe in God, it's just that I most respectfully return him his ticket. I don't want it. It's powerful. So that sounded a lot to me like Corrie ten Boom, because in the concentration camp, her sister is a saint. Her sister's forgiving people left and right. I don't understand it. She's a saint. Corrie is angry, right? She's angry. And so in the context of that, I took on Dostoevsky as one of my co-writers. So there's a conversation between Betsy and Corrie near the end of the play. Corrie says, I'm so afraid. And Betsy tells her, you said that to Papa once. And do you remember what he told us? He told us about the train station. Remember? We'll have what we need just at the moment that we need it. We will wait for our ticket. And this is a key story from Corrie ten Boom's book. Her talk about the way that her father taught her with this metaphor of the train ticket. So Betsy says, we wait for our ticket. And Corrie answers, look around, Betsy. Papa's not here. This isn't a train station. They're pushing girls into a gas chamber over there. They're shoving bodies into an oven. They aren't even trying to hide it. I can't bear it. I haven't the right to bear it or to love them or to forgive them. I can't do it. I won't do it. I won't. But he can. He does. Christ will help you. I don't care. Maybe he can bear it, but I can't, Betsy. Don't you see? I don't want his ticket. I won't get onto his train. I won't do it. I won't go. There is no journey, Betsy. We have come to the place where all roads end. Well, then it's a fit place for a beginning. And maybe that's a little of the four quartets. How about that? The job of the artist in the here and now is to reach backward into tradition with one hand, anchoring herself there in order to reach forward into the mist with the other. She closes her fist, taking hold of all she can, and brings it into the present. A new signpost plants it firmly. And that signpost, that work of art, that song, that poem, that relationship, that act of love, may one day become the anchor onto which others will cling to reach even further. New work built on work that has come before. Work is known and understood in its context. Indeed, it cannot exist at all without the tradition and context that gives it its life and being and meaning. And to me, that sounds a lot like what Jesus says in Matthew. Do not think I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I come not to abolish, but to fulfill. In Christ, what is old is not cast aside. The law is not undone. Rather, it's fulfilled and given its complete shape and meaning. Scripture doesn't tell us that creation is going to be swept away and forgotten. Creation will be redeemed. It will be seen, understood, used, and enjoyed in a fuller and more complete way. In Christ, the very matter of creation will be put to new use. I think this room is a great example. These are not merely pictures on the wall that we can throw out in a garage sale. This is Ned Bustard's work. Has Ned been here?
It hasn't.
But you've been to see Ned.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then we've got Steve Prince on the wall over here. We've got Steve Prince up here. Steve has stood in this room. So there's a very real way in which there is context here that matters, that gives it meaning. That picture is important because I know the hand that made it, right? And I love that in a cosmic sense, this rock that we're standing on is not just a rock. God is out there going, that's the place where Kirsten called Linlathen to be, and therefore it matters, right? That's the place where Steve Prince carved that etching. That's the place where Pete wrote that play, right? All these things matter. In the end, contrary to a litany of bad songs and ideas perpetrated by thin theologies and thinner art, we aren't leaving this old place to go and live with God. He's coming here to make it new, to stay and live with us. Let me say that again. We aren't leaving this old place. He's coming here to live with us again. In the book of Job, the earliest and most ancient expression of the gospel, and one of the oldest tales in all of human storytelling, the main character says this: I know that my Redeemer lives, and that in the end he will stand on the earth. And after my skin has been destroyed, yet in my flesh I will see God. I myself will see him with my own eyes. That's amazing. Think about it. The dwelling place of God will be with man here on earth. After my skin has been destroyed, I myself will stand before God and see him. And more importantly, maybe he will see me, not some bag of meat, not just some creature, but me, Pete. And that implies all of the context of my entire life. This is nothing less than the culmination of all things, not destruction, but renewal. Out of these beloved old cities, these glorious ruins, these torn down, decayed, intricately racked traditions and civilizations and stories and sculptures and poems and people, something new, built on the bones of the dead. No, not the dead. Built on the bones of what has come before, of what is remembered, of what cannot be forgotten, built perhaps on what is resurrected. The world will be Troy, I believe, and all that is past here will be the epic of the universe, the ballad they sing in the streets. So, how then shall we walk the way? We start by paying attention. We start by seeing the world for the wonder that it is, a wonder so beloved that the God who made it chooses to suffer and die for it. The matter of this place matters. Our food matters. Our stories matter. Our architecture and music and poetry all matter. If I write a story, I want it to point out into the mist where the author of my faith is laboring over things my mind cannot yet fathom. Ultreia.
That's right.
If I build a boat, I want it to leave someone with a longing to sail it because the longing points toward undiscovered shores in the distance. If I cook a meal, I want it to awaken in those who eat it the desire to taste and see that the Lord is not just good, but delicious. Thank you, Norman Wurzba.
Yes.
I want to live a life that suggests a destination but beyond what you or I can see. Final example. Remember I told you that traditionally the person who walks the road to Santiago carries a scallop shell to mark themselves as a pilgrim. It turns out that's not the whole story. Long before people carried those shells along the road to the city, they served a different purpose. For most people, the pilgrimage was a long, grueling journey that took months or even years to complete. People died along the way. Others couldn't make the entire trip and they settled in some little town and never returned home. But others, those who weathered the mountains and the valleys and all the hardships in between, they made it to the cathedral. They said hi to St. James, where he lay there patiently waiting on the day of resurrection. And then many went the extra few miles to the coast, a place literally called by the Romans the end of the earth. Finisterre. Finis, the end, and terra, earth, the end of the earth. When the pilgrims got to the beach there, they took up a scallop shell and carried it home as evidence to show others, as if to say, look, I've been there. I've seen the holy city. So can you. Pilgrims wore the shell. They became living signposts, a tradition, an entire story wrapped up and told in a simple seashell. In the same way, I hope I too can leave signposts that will point toward the city yet to come. What will that city look like? How will it all work? I don't know. It's not my job to define that world. It's my job to leave behind the bricks and mortar with which the master will build wonders. It's my job to leave the Ebenezer stone, to erect the arrow that points and says, it's that way, just over that hill, Ultreia et Susea. And after all, what is the cross, if not a signpost on which is written, come this way, come over this hill, keep going, come and see. On a mountaintop in western Spain, there is a place that pilgrims come to call the Cruz de Ferro, the Iron Cross. It's a crude piece of metalwork atop a wooden pole, maybe 40 feet tall. It's not pretty, it's stark. And the pole itself is jutting up out of a mound of stone and gravel. It's a tradition, there's that word again. It's a tradition on the Camino to carry something from home. Something that symbolizes a burden. Usually it's a stone, maybe a trinket or some other small object. And when you get to this mountaintop, you throw that burden at the foot of the cross. You let it go. Then you're free to carry on down into the holy city, Santiago, St. James on the field of stars, having left behind whatever heavy load you had been carrying. When Jennifer and I got there, it was a cloudy day. Windy, cool, mid-morning, if I remember correctly. I stood and watched others for a while. A woman clambered up the mound of stone to the base of the cross. She had something in her hand, too small to see. She whispered to it, whatever it was. Everyone around gave her space and quiet until she gently let it fall from her hand into the pile at her feet. This kind of thing happened again and again, until finally I made the climb myself. As I clambered up the mound of stones, I noticed that dozens, hundreds, thousands had accumulated, many with messages on them. Names, places, pleas, hopes, prayers, and in more languages than I could read. And more than that, all of these burdens were silently, slowly being ground to dust at the foot of the cross. This is tradition. Is this old-fashioned? Is it meaningless? Is it rote? Or is it shot full of more meaning than we can rightly fashion into words? To what bare, unspeakable truth does this mundane gravel point? Context is everything, even in a pile of rocks. And this is what we are for. We make meaning of stones, of roads, of color and flavor and sound and metal and all the stuff of this beloved old earth, of each other, of everything from time itself to scallop shells on the coast of Spain. We point the way, we mark the path, we say to one another, Ultrea. In the fullness of time, when the city descends and the king dwells again with his people, we will sing the epic of the creation. The epic whose verses and rhymes, whose melodies, harmonies, and rhythms will draw up into the eternal the traditions of this temporal existence we've lived and loved. And boy, do I hope it's called something better than Troy. But there, in that wild and far-off city, I believe that all we've made and lived and loved will be taken up and made new. We'll tell new stories. We'll write new songs. We'll build and grow and harvest and feast, and I expect we'll pause from time to time at places like the Cruz de Ferro to marvel over the flowers pushing up out of the rich soil where we left behind all those thousands and thousands of stones and trinkets and symbols. Everyone I saw that day at the Iron Cross left something. The entire experience of the Camino de Santiago, and that place in particular, was one I would call sacramental. An outward and physical expression of an inward and spiritual grace. And it was my turn. I climbed to the foot of the cross. I reached into my pack. I took out the object I had carried with me from halfway around the world. Something that belonged to a friend who left on an unexpected journey. Someone whose life is a signpost that says to me, keep going. Go further, Ultrea. Go higher, at Sosea. I have been to the holy city. Come and see. That's all I got, just to be clear.
I was going to say, and God's people said,
Amen.